Coogs House. Houston and Texas Tech are both undefeated entering this weekend's matchup in the third ward. Both fight to keep that going with keys to victory in mind on national television in the big spotlight.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Please make sure to listen each and every day here at Locked On Cougs. If you want to join the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what your favorite tailgate food is. Talk about some wings and tailgating later in the show, I'm sure. But today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Mazda. Now, Mazda is a great place to make sure you are moving the game forward and following what moves you. We got more on that fun later because today we're getting into the keys to victory for the Houston Cougars and I guess technically also the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Both programs would be undefeated throughout the entire weekend. I want to do that in the first segment. Second segment, we'll talk some about key matchups in this one. Third, final segment, we'll look at what is at stake as both former Southwest Conference rivals enter this weekend. But first, foremost off the top, before we get into those keys to victory, I do want to point out that this weekend's live pregame, first time we're doing this kind of thing at a tailgate with in conjunction with the Coogston folks in lot 16D. Going to be at 3 o'clock. That's bumped back a little bit from what we announced yesterday. We're going to 3 o'clock, starting at 3 o'clock for the 6 o'clock kickoff. Lot 16D, Locked On Cougs, Coogston tailgate. Wear your blue, cheer on the Cougs, get there early, and let's have a good time. Get the good times flowing early, and we'll ride those throughout the entirety of a fun night of Houston Cougar football. That fun night, ironically for me, is going to kind of start with the start. One of the keys to victory for Houston in this one is to both come out swinging and also not abandon their identity. Now, that's an interesting seesaw to maneuver when you're a running ball control offense. And you are a running ball control, wear the clock out kind of offense. This is more about being that and those shots you take on occasion with Slade Nagel, who's known to do that and time those up well. Think about the deep balls that they've missed a couple times so far this season. You got to be crisp on those and connect on those while keeping the majority of your game still in that majority of your game, right, in the running there, right? This is a team that has been effective running the football throughout the season. Running backs, quarterbacks, whomever. It does sound like Jermaine Burnett is going to play this weekend. He was available last weekend, but they held him out of the game anyway. It sounds like there was some, just like make sure we're going to keep off that hand and that kind of stuff. So we're hoping to get back in action. He's not been listed on an injury report yet, right? The formula that Slade Nagel runs, where you are a strong running team that takes a handful of shots and times those up well, is what was successful for them at Tulane as offensive coordinator under Willie Fritz before, right? Look at Slade Nagel's best years as a coordinator. Those teams are going to run anywhere between 30 and 33 times per game, including involving the quarterback in about 9 and 10 of those runs, depending on the year and quarterback. And then they do take deep average depth of target shots multiple times in a game to kind of make sure you're keeping defenses on their toes. And I think Nagel has proven to be really good at drawing up those at the right time. For what it's worth, that Tulane formula also helped them beat a lot of teams that they were not, air quotes, supposed to beat either. So when you see the Vegas line being what it is in this one, feels like a time to point out like that hasn't ever rattled anyone involved with this program at any point in their careers, right? Now, I do think we talk about taking shots. This is a game, my second key to victory here is this is a game that Houston's got to keep low scoring and close throughout, right? Yes, I do think the up-tempo stuff looks great at the end of the Oregon State game. I mentioned on yesterday's show it looked practiced, looked like they've done it a lot. They maybe try to break that at different points in the game on Saturday this week, right? I still feel like they call it a fastball because it goes fast. I feel like it's a curveball because you don't do it a lot, right? It's not your go-to pitch necessarily. For Houston, it kind of mixes it up. You do it maybe once, twice a half, maybe once the first half, twice the second half to kind of keep them on their toes, right, as a defense. And look, I like Houston's defense. I like Houston's DBs a lot. I think the DBs specifically will make plays in this game that kind of turn some eyes over around the country as this game's in prime time on ESPN and all of that, right? I don't know that this is the game for the defense to get a ton of reps. You want the offense to be in control of the clock, running, etc., and kind of keeping the defense off the field. Not because they can't make plays, I think they will, but because that's going to be the path to victory in this one. I mentioned in my notes here that this also involves the defense themselves getting off of the field, right? Getting to third down, getting off of with a stop there, right? That has to happen a few times as well. Obviously, in the course of this game, it's not just an offense's job to keep the defense off the field. The defense has to then get off the field once they inevitably have to get on it, right? We saw Houston do it against Colorado. I think they're capable. We've also seen Willie Fritz's teams do this when they're double-digit dogs a couple times last year. I don't think this is impossible by any stretch or measure. The last thing on my bullet points of things that are keys to the game for Houston, though, is an old saying of Willie's that he's been saying basically since that introductory press conference, almost 2 full years ago at this point. And we're looking at like, what can Houston do in this game to beat Texas Tech? They gotta not beat themselves. We've heard over and over again that Coogs can't beat the Coogs, or the program is Coogs don't beat the Coogs, or all those kinds of things. But that involves actually doing and executing and not having penalties that will spoil this one. Penalties would spoil this game fast. It would not take a whole lot of penalties to get you out of your offensive rhythm, turn the ball over, etc., give the ball back, and then Tech hits a couple big plays because they are an explosive offense. They can get going if you let them, right? They're really, big play oriented kind of offense. You got to keep them in front of you. You can't have missed assignments when we talk about keeping them in front of you. That's also Cougs beating Cougs, right? You can't let those kind of missed assignments happen. It's too late in the season. It's game 5, right? I understand it's 2 new coordinators and it's live action and all that. And we talked about in Stephen F. Austin and Rice that there were no preseason games, but we're past that now. We're in game 5, right? This Cougs don't beat the Cougs. Cougs can't beat the Cougs thing is a thing we hear a lot. And frankly, when Houston wins or is close to winning football games, it's a thing that they rely on, right? They've won 4 football games this year. Admittedly, 1 or 2 of those had a lot of penalties in them, but by and large, they've been pretty clean as far as major mistakes goes. And this is a part of that, right? Now, the crowd is going to be a raucous kind of endeavor. The internet's been stupid with fans being fans, whatever, all week long, but I think that you're going to have a very, very fun environment for, frankly, the first time in a minute when UT Austin came to town in the 1 year Houston and Texas overlapped in the Big 12. It was also a crazy atmosphere. You can go back though. We're talking in terms of just numbers of tickets sold and all that to pretty high numbers. And it's going to be a crazy day. The first Saturday home game of the year. You're playing an in-state old Southwest Conference school. I've been building them. I think this feels rivalry-esque in a lot of ways, and certainly as if you ruin their like destiny season with a win this weekend, certainly would feel like that, right? It also feels like as the first Saturday game, it's a night game. It's Saturday at 6:00. You can like get down to the 3rd Ward, get to campus. 3 o'clock for the tailgate, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, anyone? Lot 16D, 3 o'clock. You can also get down to campus and find your buddies, have a good time before the game, have a good time during the game, and really, cheer on the Cougs loudly and proudly in this one. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to this in those 3 ways. I could go into more schematic-y kind of things, but I think this is one of those things where like Tech seems to be adding some stuff each week as far as where their deep shots are going to get taken. Got to keep them in front of you. Can't let deep shots happen. We'll talk about matchups in the second segment. I think that's where more of that schematic-y kind of stuff bleeds in. And I want to get that in just one second. But first, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Mazda, because this episode helps keep move the game forward, just like Mazda is as well. Mazda is for those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. Now, this week's moving the game forward moment, if we look back at last weekend, I think the Amari Thomas catch, the third down to get it to fourth and short was great. The fourth down catch, obviously get a first down, led to the very next play, I believe, was a Boogie Johnson touchdown. Pick, either Marion Thomas catch, but that kept the ball moving forward, ultimately opening up Houston's chance to move the game forward in that one. When you follow moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's also more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at DoorDash, because it's almost weekend. Time to look back and crown the MVP of last week. Who delivered? Powered by DoorDash. Like you win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more with every time you order. These players deliver when it matters most. Let's break it down. I went with in the immediate aftermath of the game, Connor Weigman. I'm still going to stick with it because he delivered in a big way. He orchestrated that 2-minute offense a couple different times on the stretch, set up an easy chip shot of a field goal to win in overtime. When the pressure was on, Connor Weigman came through with no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, the performance wasn't a fluke. He's been building up to a streak. He's really gotten better, better, better. And just like Connor Weigman delivered with Coogs, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You can save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season long, and you can save $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo goes through November 18th. Park Ainsworth locked on Coogs here. I'll look at some matchups in this one that I think are going to be important in defining how this game goes. And I alluded to some defensive ones in a second, but really my eyes stick to Houston's offense in this. And my first matchup, for the folks that are new to the show, I do this often, but I think Connor Weigman, starting quarterback Houston Cougars, versus defensive coordinator SHIEL Wood is going to be a matchup to keep your eye on. How did that chess game go? I don't think it's play calling necessarily between like SHIEL Wood and Slade Nagel, Houston's offensive coordinator. While that's a common comparison here, the truth is SHIEL Wood is not trying to confuse Slade Nagel. SHIEL Wood is trying to confuse Connor Weigman, the guy taking the snaps, right? That's the much more comparable deal here. And Connor's looked great week after week. He's getting better. And obviously, with the success that SHIEL Wood had at Houston last year, I think most people from an X's and O's perspective think of him very highly. He did a great job at Houston as defense coordinator a year ago, right? He's got a great, preseason Big 12 Defense Player of the Year kind of guy, and Jacob Rodriguez be there at middle linebacker. He holds down the middle, keeps everyone accountable and in the right places. I can't say impressive guy on video, right? It was interesting when Chris Lovell earlier this week called him the guy he thinks would cover Koziel. I feel like Tanner Koziel is going to be much more out in the slots and stuff and passing downs, where I don't think they're going to move Jacob Rodriguez out there. But I get I guess our best player is a linebacker to cover your tight end kind of sentiment, I guess. I think what's going to be interesting to watch what SHIEL Wood's defensive game and Connor and how he matches up with it is going to be how he accounts for Connor Weigman's legs. We saw, frankly, SHIEL Wood do a great job of negating the quarterback run and Avery Johnson a year ago when he was the Houston defense coordinator, right? That was in a way that, frankly, still has Kansas State feeling kind of broken in a copycat sport like football is, right? What does SHIEL Wood do to Connor? Because Connor's not, first of all, the weather does not look anything like that this weekend. The temperatures be a little warm, but it's not going to be the immediate rainfall right beforehand and all that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be able to throw the football. That's important, I guess, right? It's not like you're going to have to throw on a wet duck or something like that through a football game. But SHIEL Wood, it's not like Connor Weigman's an option style quarterback or a run first, pass second kind of quarterback. The kind of scheme he's drawing up to stop Connor will be interesting. And how Connor exploits that, because there's no such thing as the perfect defense. Every defense has holes. It's about finding them and executing that in the handful of seconds you got before the defensive line's bearing down your throat, right? And I think it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I also could see, SHIEL WOOD has not blitzed a lot yet this season. They're one of the lowest blitz rate teams in America for good reason. They got great pass rushers, sure, right? Um, does he dial it up against Connor because they almost would rather him get flushed and run than hitting Amari Thomas, hitting Boogie Johnson, hitting Tanner Cozio, right? Would they'd rather him take off and then take their chances because they've got some great athletes in the box, right? Would that be kind of what their MO is? I think that's actually potentially a thing you could see here, right? My other matchups I look at here get more hypothetical in the second one, I guess, in that I'm just going to say Houston's pass protection versus Texas Tech's pass rush is a key matchup in this game. Look, I don't think it's as simple as like Romello Height and David Bailey versus Dalton Merriman, I don't think it just goes as simple as tackle versus defensive end. Houston's not dumb. They're not going to let that happen every snap, right? There may be some snaps you're stuck on an island 1-on-1 that happens, but by and large, you're going to see tight ends involved in max protection, chips out of running backs. You're going to see slide protections, quick throws with cut blocks, all that kind of stuff to kind of negate the pass rush schematically when it's a passing down. Because ultimately, the biggest thing Houston's going to do to slow down that pass rush is run the football. And they run the football very well thus far. And if you're a defensive lineman and you are assuming run first and second down, that occasional first down pass really kind of throws off your pass rush rhythm, right? Those kinds of things I think will play out in this game as well. I also think there's ways you can run like your RPO stuff to read a Romello Height or a David Bailey off the edge, right? And that slows down their pass rush because then they don't know if they're unblocked, like their easy path to the quarterback, whatever might be because of an RPO kind of situation. It also is a way to ensure that they're wrong, right? Because you're reading them and making a decision based off of their actions. I say all that to say that I don't expect, I mean, they practice too, they're on scholarship too. I don't expect any offensive line to bat 1,000 against any defensive line. I don't expect any pass protection to bat 1,000 against any defensive pass rush. That's not, from an analyst perspective, feasible. That's certainly how you coach it, right? Just not how an analyst would ever look at it. It's not possible you go at that bat 1,000. However, if Houston's pass protection can keep them competitive in this game, they've got like an incredibly good chance. Like that might flip the game in and of itself. And so to watch early at what things Houston's doing in terms of pass protection to try and help slow down one again, hats off, text pass rush, one of the best ones you see on TV, right? What Houston does to slow them down, I think is gonna be interesting there. And I do think Slade Nagel's got some stuff up his sleeves. And I think that frankly, as long as they keep this thing close, like I mentioned my keys to the game in the first segment, they can do those things. My last one's on the defensive side. I think Carlos Allen in this matchup is going to be huge. I don't know if that's Davion Carter, Sheridan Allen, Will Jados. That's guard, center, guard. And I don't mean to pick on those three in particular. I do think that they look talented. I just think this isn't about how bad those three guys are. I think Carlos Allen is that guy. I watch one video and I just get amazed week after week. 31 tackles to lead all defensive linemen in college football, and he's getting double teamed at an incredibly high rate. I look at his game and the body of work speaks for itself. Right now, I will point out that much like Houston's going to do their own kinds of pass protection things to try and negate some of the pass rush, I'm sure Carlos Allen gets doubled a lot in this game. He always does. Why I think he's an important matchup with those three guys is if he still puts up a Carlos Allen kind of game with 8 to 10 tackles, maybe more, if he's impactful on some couple quarterback hurries, if he can do the Carlos Allen things, which I think he can do against the weaker part of the offensive line for Texas Tech. Look, Tech invested a lot of money in a handful of spots that are really important. On the offensive line, those are the tackles. If an offensive tackle is trying to block Carlos Allen in this football game, they're drawing stuff in the dirt and figuring it out because that's just not schematically what they're supposed to be doing. I think Carlos Allen wins his matchups against the guards and center that Texas Tech has played. And I think that could make a big difference in the game because so much of the high-powered, dynamic, explosive offense you hear about with Texas Tech right now when they throw, all those points they scored in 8 minutes against Utah or whatever. They scored a bajillion points against FCS, whomever, or whatever, right? All that. They can score. They have an explosive offense. They can score. None of that matters. All of that goes down the drain if Carlos Allen is in Baron Morton's lap. That changes things, and I think he can get there very, very quickly. And so I think that that's going to be how this goes. And look, I understand there are a lot of iterations of this game that Houston doesn't win. I'm not that guy. I do think Houston wins the game on Saturday in a low scoring output, kind of like you saw against Kansas State a year ago. But I do think that there's been a lot made of this. Like this can't happen. They're not like it's college football first. Weirder things have happened plenty of times, and it's also I think a game where Houston's going to show a lot of people like they're at a better spot than people might have realized. Anyway, the program. We'll talk more about what's at stake here in a second in the final segment. Before we get to that, I do want to remind you guys that today's show is brought to you by a new buddy, our buddies over at Peloton, because Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's the most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton's built for breakthroughs with tools to help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. These swivel screens are game changing. Go from running on the tread to strength training without missing a beat, just moving within your own home gym. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. Parker Rangers locked on Coogs here. Look, I usually have a magic number 3 thing here where I go through 3 things, 3 things, 3 things, and I get that that is fun for symmetry. The stakes of this game are much simpler than that. Um, Look, I think these two programs are closer than people realize. I say that as both are undefeated. I know that they have a common opponent. Those games went very differently. One of those games had Oregon State coming to Lubbock and playing after having flown across the country. Another one of those games had Houston going to Corvallis and playing that game, having flown across the country going for a bye week. And I think that those are different outcomes. Those are different games based on circumstances. I don't think it's a helpful thing for Houston. They found a way to win a close game, right? But I think this game is going to show that these teams are closer than people realize. And the biggest thing that is at stake, the biggest thing people are going to talk about being at stake, by and large, is that everyone's going to form some sort of a mindset about these programs after this game. We're 5 games into the season after this game, right? This is your both programs' 5th game. People feel pretty comfortable making assessments at that point. And both programs are going to remember how this one goes for a while. Texas Tech AD is literally calling this thing another home game for them on their schedule on Twitter, right? And while he's tweeting, or Texas Tech is tweeting H-Town takeover and paint the town red, as if those weren't Houston mantras at different points in marketing campaigns. They can say they don't care about this game and say whatever petulant little things they want to. They're putting way too much effort into this for that to be the case. You don't put that much effort into something you don't care about. Sorry, you just don't. And Houston is going to have an atmosphere. It's going to be the best it's been in at least several years, if not longer. 6 o'clock game, first Saturday home game, tailgating. Shouts to Coogston, the tailgating party again. It's 3 o'clock, lot 16D, wear your blue. All of that, wearing the blue, all of that adds to a fun, different atmosphere. In terms of football, it's not the narrative. You're both 4-0 in the Big 12 and both pushing, the Big 12 itself as a conference, I guess, is pushing in some ways for like a second college football playoff spot. And both these programs are pushing to be nationally recognized in a way that the Big 12 continues to get kicked to the side for reasons we frankly break down often enough on the show that I don't have to list them all over again, but that feels silly, right? Each game of the season, these Big 12 games specifically, in a weird way, feels like a playoff game. the Big 12 last season got just one team in the college football playoff. There were several years, and Houston wasn't in the conference yet. There were several years where the Big 12 and the 4-team playoff didn't get any teams in. And I don't think any team in the Big 12 this season goes undefeated. I don't mean to say that like mathematically either team was like eliminated after this game. I don't think Tech goes undefeated. I don't think Iowa State goes undefeated. I don't even in my analyst part of my brain think Houston goes undefeated. I say analyst part of my brain. Don't jump me there. It's just not the conference that happens in. And while mathematically the loser isn't out of a trip to Arlington after this weekend, it certainly gets a lot harder. And you can say whatever you want about what you think the goals of this program are, but there are 4 teams in this conference that went 7-2 in conference play this year. Houston's schedule, if you look at it, with Gundy being fired and who knows what's happening in Texas and Oklahoma State, with you look at West Virginia and the roster turnover they've got, and quarterbacks now being on IRs and hurt and quitting and whatever. We'll talk about all that when we get there. There's a very real shot that Houston's going to be 7-2 in conference, undefeated in non-conference in this season. Just look at the games they've got left. Now, again, analyst part of my brain is not predicting that. I'm not, but like you look at the schedule and it's not impossible that Houston's sitting there at 7-2. There's not a whole bunch of world beaters that Houston's out of class with, right? And the reality of getting to that is that whichever team is trying to do that in this has got to play really well this weekend. Tech under Coach McGuire has been bad at a bye weeks both of the last 2 seasons and dropped games they were favorites in, and they've done at other points of the season as well. It's not uncommon for Tech to, under Joe McGuire, not be great in a big moment like that, or in a moment they should be like that, right? On the inverse, the flip of that coin is in the year and change we've had Willie Fritz here, Houston's already won games that they were big underdogs in. Tulane, when Willie Fritz was there the last handful of seasons, was also winning games they were big underdogs in. That's kind of what he does. We also have seen, a different head coach, but a Houston program play against the UT Austin. All we heard all the time was like, well, the UT Austin fans are just going to overrun the Houston stadium. It's going to be, might as well be a burnt orange stadium. Call it a home game for Texas. Yada, 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 yada. Houston's fans showed up in that game. It was a great atmosphere. Houston, honestly, with some better officiating at certain parts, might have won that game, right? Like that kind of close throughout. And I say all that to say that like this is going to leave an image on people's brains of both programs. Look, Tech has really talked up their football program, and they've invested a lot of money in it. They lose to Houston, and it's going to look like, what were they doing, right? That's going to be the story, is you did all that to lose to a program that's in their second year, the new head football coach that just got to the Big 12 a couple years ago. That's what people are going to say, right? Meanwhile, if you're Houston, you start off 4-0, you're saying we're building this thing back up, we're ahead of schedule, da-da-da-da, things feel good. Big-time transfer quarterback, big-time transfer tight end, handful of guys on the defense, big news. And then you get overtime against Oregon State, and if you drop one to Tech in the back-to-back weeks, I completely understand how that could happen on the academic analyst side of my brain. I'm telling you right now, the internet's ruthless. That's not how it's going to happen in public perception, right? And so both of these programs are fighting for that in a weird way. They're also both fighting to say, like, no, this is the good year we thought we were having. Look, evidence here. We need evidence. Because I'm not sure beating Colorado, I'm not sure beating Utah if you're Texas Tech. I'm not sure those are evidence. I mean, we said the same about Utah last year for all the Tech fans that are now my comments typing away. It didn't end up working out that way, right? Colorado, for all people giving me a hard time about thinking Colorado's a good win for Houston or whatever, a whole lot of hype around BYU right now is the top 25. That game, what game was that game, right? Anyway, we're going to be driving down Friday, doing some stuff in the area Saturday morning, going live from a tailgate with Coogston at lot 16D, 3 o'clock on Saturday. We'll be live after the game as well. Locked On Cougars, talking all things Houston Cougars and more. Locked On Cougars, from the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.